NatureServe. NatureServe, perhaps some of you know, was a spin-out of all the science people from the Nature Conservancy. And for the last several years, that organization has been building an amazing new map. This map is going to be a gift to the American people. It's all about biodiversity. It's going to show what others haven't seen ever before, and you're the first group to actually see it. I'm not going to talk much more than that. I'm going to just ask if Healy is here. Oh, here she comes. A very special person with her team, Reagan Smith. Let's welcome her.
Thank you.
Good
Jack.
luck. They're
Thank
a little
you.
nervous, so, I mean, they're really nervous. I've been with a lot of people before. They are very nervous, but they're getting better now. So please don't scare them, okay?
Thank you, Jack. This is a story about biodiversity mapping. So why should you care about that? Because the diversity of life is the foundation of our economic, our ecological, our cultural, and our spiritual well-being. Because the food we eat, the medicines we take, the buildings we live in, because the poems and the paintings that touch us, these are all gifts from the diversity of life. Interactions in the biological and physical world provide services that we cannot survive without, such as pollination, such as nutrient cycling, and water and air purification. When we think of biodiversity, we might think of tropical rainforests or coral reefs, where the diversity of life is indeed staggering. But our own country harbors globally significant biodiversity. In fact, it's the richness of our natural heritage that is a fundamental reason we are so prosperous as a nation. We value nature's diversity. We have passed state and federal laws to safeguard species from extinction, and we've protected lands and waters to sustain their habitats. And yet we are failing to stem the decline. There are over 1,500 species that are already listed on the Endangered Species Act, but there are many thousands more that we know to be imperiled. Whether or not we intended it, we are all now stewards of our nation's natural heritage. Every day, decisions that we make about real estate development, energy infrastructure, transportation, military readiness, agriculture, forestry, recreation, these decisions have implications for imperiled species today and for preventing vulnerable ones from further decline. NatureServe is a biodiversity information network that spans the Western Hemisphere. We're part of the intelligent nervous system for conserving the diversity of life. In the US, beginning almost 50 years ago, we built a network of natural heritage programs in every state. These programs produce essential information about species and ecosystems, where they are found, and to what degree they are imperiled. For decades of biodiversity inventory and data curation and analysis, information technology has connected the data and the people of our network. Now, using modern Esri tools and Microsoft's cloud computing resources, we generate, analyze, and communicate biodiversity data at a pace and scale that's never before been possible. Today, we are publicly releasing the first high-resolution view of where our nation's most imperiled species are found. We've produced detailed maps of the geographic distribution of over 2,200 species at risk, plants and animals, vertebrates and invertebrates, both aquatic and terrestrial. These bright colors indicate where multiple imperiled species have habitats that co-occur. We've then stacked these maps to see what we've never seen before. With unprecedented resolution, we can now identify the places that matter most for sustaining our nation's biodiversity. We call this effort the Map of Biodiversity Importance, or Mobe for short. And here are just a few of the types of insights revealed by this map. Areas important for preventing extinction occur all across our country, from the rivers of the Southeast to the Intermountain West, to the coast of California. Look here in North Carolina in the coastal plain. Multiple Department of Defense installations occur in a geography rich with biodiversity, both aquatic and terrestrial. Now, we can assess military readiness against the need to sustain threatened, endangered, and at-risk species. We can place mitigation efforts to the areas that they matter most and can be most effective, both on installation and off-site. We can see how the lands that we've already protected for nature are indeed serving as refuges for threatened species. Look here in Utah, where our national parks, they are like biological jewels protecting threatened species. Most of those exist nowhere else on Earth. But the majority of our federal lands are not managed for biodiversity protection. We can see here how our protected areas are embedded in a matrix of other federal lands managed by multiple agencies, in this case, green for the BLM and orange for the Forest Service. We can identify which areas have important habitats that might conflict with other resource demands. And then we can also identify where those conflicts don't exist. Mobe maps can strengthen collaboration across agencies and across jurisdictions, an increasing need in our rapidly changing world.
But where do these maps come from? How do we say with certainty that the rangelands of Utah or the coastal plain of North Carolina are keys to sustaining biodiversity? Answering that question takes three things: an army of sensors, information infrastructure to bring data together, and the best of data science to turn that information into knowledge. I'm going to show you how we do just that with this recipe story map for better biodiversity mapping. That army of sensors, that's NatureServe's network of botanists and zoologists, over 1,000 strong. Through fieldwork spanning 5 decades, we've collected data like these. This map shows documented occurrences of our nation's very most imperiled species. These records are just one subset of NatureServe's extensive data holdings. Behind each of these shapes, we maintain detailed information on the species they represent. Species like the Escambia map turtle, which has been assessed by NatureServe as globally imperiled, and which is currently being considered for listing under the Endangered Species Act. We know these data aren't perfect. They represent only where we've been able to survey. And there's gaps, like up in Idaho or down in Arkansas. Are there no records because there's no imperiled species there? Or is it just because we haven't been able to look? That's where data science comes in. Using Esri technology and with support from Microsoft's AI for Earth program, we've built a spatial modeling infrastructure in the cloud that allows our scientists from Pennsylvania to Oregon to work together. Together, we've built predictive distribution models for thousands of species and are filling in those blank places. The map Healy shared combined those models for the many species, but I'm going to walk through our process for just one, the threatened Jollyville Plateau salamander. This little guy doesn't have a topo map on his skin like the map turtle, but he does have these really unique external gills, and he's otherwise a pretty perfect representative for all the species we've modeled. The first ingredient for our better maps is our documented occurrence data, shown here for the salamander. The next ingredient is environmental predictor layers, spatial data to characterize the habitats in which these species occur. Through the efforts and investment of federal agencies like NASA and USGS and EPA, data to characterize the environment is increasingly available and increasingly accurate. That includes layers like soil pH, derived from the NRCS soil survey. Things like distance to coniferous forest cover, derived from the National Land Cover data set. Information on wetlands from the National Wetlands Inventory. And data on climate, like this map of growing season temperatures, which obviously is pretty important for many species. We have data to characterize aquatic environments as well, like this layer showing hydrological connectivity from EPA's StreamCat dataset. Building on these foundational federal resources, we've built a national library of over 250 environmental predictor layers optimized for species modeling. Next, we mix our ingredients together, and we turn up the heat. Using open science tools like R together with ArcGIS, we can run a machine learning algorithm called Random Forest to explore the relationship between the salamander and the environment. We get a taste of how the cooking's going, with graphs for the variables most important for predicting habitat, and evaluations of model performance. All this information is documented in extensive metadata automatically, enabling our process to be transparent and reproducible. Most importantly, this recipe produces new maps. I'm going to show those to you now in ArcGIS Pro. So you'll remember where we started with that documented occurrence data. That's up on the screen in blue. But now behind that, we have a map surface showing the probability for any location on the landscape that conditions are suitable for the salamander. The areas in yellow are just those places most likely to support the species. And this becomes our salamander map. So we've got a great yellow blob on the screen, and Healy and I think that's really exciting. But why do you care? I'm going to show you how this big yellow blob can help us balance the needs of society with the needs to protect species habitat. Let's consider the world the salamander finds himself in. Texas is one of the fastest growing states in the nation, and that growth puts pressure on the salamander's habitat. The same story is true for all the species we've modeled. Whether the pressure is from urbanization or industry or agriculture, the decisions we make determine the impacts of development. Let's consider just transportation infrastructure needs. These purple lines are planned road improvement projects in Texas over the next 4 years. For most species at risk, we've previously only had coarse range maps to help with planning. For the Jollyville Plateau salamander, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provides this range map, which delineates the 2 counties in which the species is known or suspected to occur. If this is the only information available to us, it seems there's pretty significant conflict between salamander habitat and transportation needs. But let's bring in our new map. Here again is the predicted habitat in yellow, just those areas of highest probability. That model successfully captured all our documented occurrences. If we wanted to be a little bit more conservative, we might want to drop that threshold a bit and bring in a bit more habitat. Even then, we can pretty clearly see places where there is some conflict, but the many places where there clearly isn't. These models have the flexibility to fit the decisions they need to inform. Field surveys could be more targeted. A project siting might be proactively adjusted. The most sensitive areas can be avoided. Those actions, though, some of them have pretty high stakes, and it's important that all stakeholders have confidence in the data being used. Can we really trust the output of a machine learning algorithm to give us defensible data on salamander habitat or habitat for any species? Once again, collaborative science can provide us an answer. We've built a web application that allows species experts from across agencies and organizations to view the results. Here's the salamander model again in that application. The reviewers can tell us how well the model performs, as well as provide geographically specific feedback. Let's take a look at one of the other models we built, the model for the Escambia map turtle, Graptimys ernsti. The application takes us right to the geography where the species occurs, in the Gulf Coast region. Zooming in a bit, we see in yellow areas along these rivers where the turtle has predicted habitat. The reviewer can bring in their own data and see how it aligns with the map. Here, I've dropped in some survey data from the Alabama Natural Heritage Program. we can see that we may have missed some salamander habitat down here. By adjusting the model threshold, the reviewer could determine an optimal point for defining habitat and save that information and send it back to the modeling team, allowing us to make our end products better. By uploading those observation data and sharing it with us securely in ArcGIS Online, we have new information we can use to rerun the model. This information becomes part of a dynamic process where models can be continually refined and stakeholders can be engaged along the way. By tapping into human expertise and machine learning, the data for decision-making becomes better and better.
So NatureServe has created these models not just for the Escambia map turtle, but for all imperiled vertebrates. For pollinators, such as threatened butterflies. For the first time ever, we have a high-resolution view of imperiled plants in our nation, over 1,000 of them. And even for freshwater species, such as mussels and crayfish, where the US harbors globally significant biodiversity there in the southeast. Taken together, this map for over 2,200 species at risk and the methods that underlie it, that generated it, we provide the high-resolution information that is needed to streamline decisions, to reduce conflict, and to guide conservation actions to where they're needed most. But these species richness maps alone, they don't tell the whole story. The picture looks quite different if we weight each species by the extent of its range. So this approach recognizes that wide-ranging species have many more opportunities for conservation actions than narrow-range ones. So we need to know those places where imperiled species with very limited ranges need protection. We also need to recognize that we've already invested in conservation actions in this country. We've set aside nearly 10% of the lands and waters of the lower 48 states into parks and wilderness designated for conservation and recreation. Now we're able to ask which places have the most at-risk species that are unprotected, that fall outside that conservation estate, that 10% that we've protected. And we know now that investments in these places can prevent extinctions. So here are some of the interesting outcomes from this suite of analyses. There's almost 300 imperiled species that have nearly all of their distribution entirely on federal lands, and not necessarily federal lands managed for protection. Like this beautiful rare plant, it's Henderson's Horkelia. 98% of its modeled distribution falls on Forest Service lands that are managed for multiple uses. Or Cronquist's Phacelia. We really should have picked a plant name that is easier to pronounce, but that plant is a southwestern desert plant that is critically imperiled, but it's not protected yet under the Endangered Species Act. Over 80% of its land occurs in BLM managed lands that are used for multiple extractive uses. And most of that area falls in the region of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, from which protection was removed in 2017. So decisions are being made right now about land management in that area. But we know that public lands alone cannot sustain our nation's biodiversity. Especially in the eastern US, like here in Virginia, private conservation has a huge role to play, as shown here in white. Mobe maps can help guide private conservation investment of landowners and land trusts that are interested in conserving species at risk. Mobe maps can also help with public-private partnerships, such as candidate conservation agreements or habitat conservation plans. And a final surprising result is just how many Americans live near an area that is important for preventing extinction. This map shows that 90% of Americans live within these bright green areas, which fall 30 miles near an area of high biodiversity importance. Just about everyone in our country can get involved in efforts to sustain our nation's natural heritage. So the opportunities to build upon this work are clear, and they're being embraced by federal agencies. Let's hear directly from a federal partner who's using Mobe data and tools, our colleague from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Dr. Todd Jones-Ferrand.
Good morning, folks. My primary role is to bring best available science to support decisions by the conservation community in the Southeast. For the Fish and Wildlife Service, that means supporting species status assessments, or SSAs, which we use to make decisions under the Endangered Species Act. For the Southeast Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, that means supporting implementation of state wildlife action plans. The Escambia map turtle, which Regan just highlighted, is one of about 250 SSAs that the service needs to complete in the next 5 to 10 years. It's also one of 960 regional species of greatest conservation need identified by the states. To successfully sustain species such as this, the states, Fish and Wildlife Service, and our federal and NGO partners need a common understanding of species distributions and habitat requirements so that we can work effectively across state lines. The tools and frameworks used to develop the Map of Biodiversity Importance can help us get down that road by providing a transparent and collaborative platform. That platform can help us learn over time and improve our actions so that our decisions are more defensible. Finally, we can use that framework to look forward and predict the outcomes of conservation or other actions on birds, turtles, fish, plants, pollinators, all at the same time so that we can plan more holistically and act more efficiently. I am really looking forward to bringing this framework to the Southeast. Thank you.
The Map of Biodiversity Importance shows us that the southeastern US, where Todd's efforts are focused, is very rich in biodiversity, both aquatic and terrestrial. But there's other areas where very high spatial precision are necessary for decisions, and the data and tools underlying Mobe can serve those needs as well. In southeastern New Mexico, lands managed by the BLM are undergoing rapid oil and gas development. These same lands are home to a suite of rare species, plants whose distribution is very poorly understood. An example pictured here is the gypsum milkvetch, a member of the genus Astragalus, whose seeds and roots have been used in traditional medicine for thousands of years. We begin with a limited understanding of confirmed occurrences of the species, shown here in white. Then the Mobe project has generated a first draft model, shown here in yellow. But although our environmental data library has over 250 national layers, gypsum milkvetch needs gypsum soils, and we don't have a national gypsum soils data layer. So working with USGS and NRCS, we've just produced a regional gypsum soils data layer that will be used to produce the next generation model. Once those models are complete, botanists that are experts from the New Mexico Natural Heritage Program will conduct structured field surveys where the model predicted highest probability of suitable habitat. Those field surveys will yield confirmed presence-absence data that will in turn be used to inform the third generation model. Our approach is built to be iterative, to be dynamic, to evolve as the data evolves, so we are always using the best available information to guide decision-making. So, a decade ago, this map represented our nation's highest resolution data for assessing the geography of extinction risk. This map shows hotspots of imperiled species in those locations where we've been able to survey. Over the years, it has been the single most requested synthesis data product of the NatureServe network. This map is static. This map requires a lot of manual effort to update. In fact, this is the most recent version, and it's from 2013. But it's now the 2020s. Data are dynamic. Methods are transparent and repeatable. Technology supports real-time analyses and collaborative science. Today, we are proud to release the Map of Biodiversity Importance, a product of modern biodiversity science. There are now 15 maps in all that are available on Esri's Living Atlas, and you can interact with these data and analyze them in ArcGIS Online. You can also visit the Mobe Hub initiative, where you can learn more about this effort and use Hub technology to share and discover data and collaborate with Mobe data and tools. We aren't stopping here. This is a living map, one that will expand to additional species and geographies over time. Enabled by technology, NatureServe will continue to bring together data and people to meet the information needs we all share as stewards of our irreplaceable natural heritage. Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Smythe, not Smith. I'm very sorry about that. Healy, isn't this remarkable work? This is great science.
Thank you.
At all levels. And I spoke earlier of the gift that they are making, which is they're publishing and making available all of the layers that were composite layers that made up this map, as well as the final result for you guys to work with. It's all available openly in ArcGIS Online.